Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Astrid Spink, and I am the Sectors and Communities Manager for the public and health sectors in the UK. It's my role to work with members within those sectors to bring them together, to build communities, and to support them with engagement and learning opportunities. Um, I also work to promote our members within the sector and their careers, and therefore also the qualification within those sectors. Now, I'm assisted in this role by our public and health sector network community panels who help me to shape the activities relevant to the sector. This morning is the start of our Talking Public Sector series of discussions, each of which will focus on a particular subsector. So this morning we're focusing on local government with panel members Evans Chisala and Angela Ireland, and our guest speaker Serge Bami from LGImprove. This part of the presentation will be recorded for those who are unable to attend and for future reference. However, the discussion part will not be recorded to enable people to feel free to raise their questions and points. Before we start the presentations, I just want to share my screen briefly to give you a few housekeeping rules. So I see some of you already have your cameras on, which is great. Please do turn those on if possible. It's always good to see people in the room. Please do put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking. It just removes any background noise and will make the recording smoother. While the presentations are ongoing, please do raise your hand to join the discussion or put your question within the chat box. And we'd love for this discussion to continue after the presentation. As I say, part of my role is to build community with members within this sector. So please do share your LinkedIn profiles if you're on the platform in the chat box so that you can connect with each other during and after this discussion. So I'll now hand over to Evans and Angela just to give a quick introduction about themselves and their work on the panel before they then hand over to Serge. And as I say, please do feel free to use the chat function for your comments and questions and to add your LinkedIn profiles to connect after the discussion. So Evans, did you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Sorry I'm not on camera. For some reason it's not working. But my name is Evans Chisala and I'm a member of the SCCA Public Sector Panel. I'm also a member of the SCCA Member Advisory Committee for UK and previously was chair for SCCA Sheffield Panel. And I currently work at South Yorkshire Police. That's the name.
Thank you, Evans.
That's all
Angela,
about
did
me.
you want to
Thank
say a quick hello?
Sorry, I have trouble going off mute. Hello. Hi, my name is Angela Ireland. I'm also a member of the Public Sector Network panel and I currently work in local government in Wandsworth.
Thank you, Angela. And now over to Serge, please, to introduce yourself and to start your presentation for this morning.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along. And thank you, Astrid and the others, for inviting me. My name's Serge Bami. I'll share my screen in a minute and talk to you a bit about LGImprove. But the key thing about this morning is really to talk about two key topics that have come up in some of the feedback that Astrid has shared in terms of what's concerning people. Somewhere in this virtual crowd is a fellow director of mine, Darren Cole, listening in. We would have had our third director, Dan, but he's decided to go on holiday and leave me and Darren to do all the work, which is, you know, it happens. I guess he deserved a holiday. Dan's really the local government financial resilience person. There's a couple of familiar names in the audience that may have come across Dan before. He's often quoted in Room 51 and MJ and those sort of things, talking about reserves and capital health and those sort of things. So I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Hopefully this will work. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so welcome, as I said. I've got a short time frame and quite a lot to get through, so apologies if I go through this at a bit of a breakneck speed, but I really want to get to the kind of Q&A afterwards, because that's where all the views come out, or whether this resonates with people, or whether they think, you know, the approach needs to be changed. So there is quite a bit to talk about. So forgive me if I canter through this quite quickly. I know that people are monitoring the chat. Please do put your comments, challenges, agreements, all those sort of things in there. I may not be looking at the screen if anyone can see me, because I've got a weird camera set up here and I'm kind of looking at a presentation but not the camera, so I am not ignoring you, honestly. So really, the first thing I always look at when I'm listening to someone is why. What do they do? Why should I listen to them? What's important about this? And it's just 2 minutes on LGImprove and who we are. So we're a consultancy that's different, but all consultancies say that, don't they? We are not a consultancy with a local government arm. We only do local government. That's all we do. We don't do anything else. Astrid was really keen on saying, you know, the presentation needs to be valuable. It can't be a big sales pitch, which is music to our ears, because we don't have a sales team and we don't have business development directors. We don't have account managers. I spent my life in consulting and looking at clients that had account managers come up and they'd always go, what does this person do? And who's paying for them? So we only have people that do work. So even the 3 directors work with local government organizations day in, day out. We think that's really important. None of us actually have a non-delivery role, because local government is changing so much that we need to really hone in on keeping close to it. And we get called to solve a number of problems. So what do we do? Well, I'll go on to that in a minute. We only do 3 things as well. We know what we're good at. We turn down more work than maybe some people are comfortable with. So we're very focused. And I think how we do it is quite interesting. We don't really have any offices. We run a virtual organization. We've been quite successful in doing that. We deal with a lot of associates. We don't work on a consulting model that says we need utilization. So what actually happens, and you may have come across this, is that people have a team that they need to get out there and earn money. And so they end up putting people who may not be the right people into organizations. Some of your concerns, this is what I picked up from Astrid in terms of some key points that came up: budgets, inflation, funding cuts, unreliable data, outdated IT, and widening skills. So I kind of looked at this and thought, how do we link in with some of these areas? We can't pretend we're going to solve all of them, but hopefully this will resonate. So what do we actually do? Well, there's 3 areas, and this is what we focus on: financial resilience, expertise on demand, and information management. We don't do anything outside of these things. They're pretty self-explanatory in their own way. Expertise on demand in the middle is really where we put local government experts in for niche projects, or where a local authority is really struggling with a very specialized area. We're not an agency. We don't farm CVs out to everyone. So we've put comms directors in for unitaries. We've put planning people in, GDPR compliance, auditors, replacement S151s. It's all local government focused. So I won't really focus on expertise demand because that's pretty obvious. What I want to do is look at some of the other areas and how they might resonate with you and some of the problems that we've come across. So again, back to some of your concerns. Looking at the first area, we might touch on budgets, funding cuts. Now, we don't control funding cuts and we don't control inflation, but we do say that understanding your financial area is really key. And there's a lot of expertise and comment and debate out there, and we have quite a simplistic but very detailed approach. So back to the 3 areas. Financial resilience is what I'll talk about now and what that means. And when I look at financial resilience, and when we look at it, we always think, well, what does it mean? And I guess in our mind, it's the ability to adequately fund the needs of your authority in the face of internal, external pressures and uncertainty. It's that ability. That means that we need to look at some key areas, and we take a very diagnostic approach to this. So financial resilience works in 2 ways. Our first area is discovery and review, which we call a detailed diagnosis. So forgive me for the medical analogy, because I will be pushing it. But you know, when you go to a doctor and you say, I've got a headache, now a doctor could say, well, just take some paracetamol. Or he could say, well, do you ache anywhere else? And you say, well, it is my neck. So they run a series of tests, and they may go, you know what, your blood sugar's low or you're anemic or those sort of things. That's the real cause of the problem. So our starting point with financial resilience, and where we do get called in a lot, is to do a discovery and review. Now, a lot of people have some of this information already, some of them don't, and there are 4 areas, but I can't go through all those 4 areas, but I will go through one of them to give you some detail. After that, you have a clear set of financial health actions, exactly how a doctor or a professional would do it. And we're very much of the case, you go to a doctor, the doctor might tell you things you might not need to know or might not like to know, is more. They don't need to be your friend, they just need to really ask the problem. So I won't read through all the slides here, but that's pretty self-explanatory. The 4 areas, benchmarking, service costs, budget reviews, capital reviews, and then that plan, a set of actions. We don't tend to go, look, this is the next bit you do, because there are a number of areas you could go down. Is it outcomes-based budgeting? Is it your financial processes? Do you need an investment review? Is it capital restructuring? We don't know until we find out. Now, sometimes clients come to us with a very clear view. They're kind of self-diagnosing, they know themselves, and they say, this is the specific area where we want some help, and we'll do that. So I'm only going to talk about nothing else in financial resilience, and the most interest we get is financial benchmarking, because there's a lot of benchmarks out there, and we do, as I said, take a diagnostic approach, and it really relates to 6 models, and you can see those on the screen there. Reserves, capital health, council tax, investment properties, settlement, business rates. We run these models. So just a bit of background, we work on audited published accounts data. We don't use what-if analysis or projections. I know there's a lot of talk about offlog and metrics and those sort of things, and maybe there'll be a discussion about those things. We're very clear that we use data that's out there, that's real. It's kind of the Winston Churchill element of, there's the truth. You may not like it, you may disagree with it, you may ridicule it, you may really agree with it, but there it is. So we work on published accounts data. We have a data bank that stretches over a decade. So we're able to go through the analysis for all of the authorities. Certainly in England, we're just starting Scotland and Wales now, and pick on trends, comparisons, areas of focus, direction of travel. And that kind of gives us a report, like a medical report, again, pushing the doctor analogy here, that gives us our first kind of diagnosis as to what's happening. Often things come up in this report that people didn't know themselves. The amount of times we sat there with senior leaders and one maybe the CEO or even the 151 said, I'm not sure we were right about that. Our council tax model shows, your bandy authorities, your tax base, those sort of things. And though that report really shines a light on what we need to do next. So it's quite key. Once we've done that, and people have looked at this, some of our clients use these for different means, and some people on the call may be doing this now. So in terms of all of our models underpinning MTF strategies with accurate, up-to-date figures, there's been quite a bit of interest in S114 authorities and how they got to where they were and whether there were lessons to be learnt. And then people use combinations of models, scrutiny documents is sent there as going concerns. So our reserves model and capital health are used to show comparisons, direction of travel, supporting S25 reports. So people use our models and the output to create appendices to look at. We've been approached by a few authorities who are looking at capital projects, and they want to make sure that members are aware of the consequences of these capital projects and whether they are viable or whether they need tweaking. Our models get used a lot there. They are a source of truth because we always go back to this is what the figures are telling us. We don't tell you what's right or wrong, but we give you all the information to say this is a more informed decision based on what we need. So use of capital. It's amazing how many people that we find don't quite understand. Not an expert either, Dan's not here, but how it's used and the justifying the viability of them. The annual financial settlement is really interesting. So as soon as the settlement comes out, we're usually out there on the socials within a day. to say what the impact has been on your specific authority and how that compares to other authorities. People find that quite useful. And they use it to lobby sometimes for a fairer funding settlement, because we can show the impact either across the UK, either in regions, either in authorities like yourselves. You're able to choose your own benchmarks as well. Council tax income, always interesting. That's our council tax model. And then business rates, how your gains in business rates compare with others and what that means. So that kind of brings up the 6 models and some examples of how they're used. Now, I've talked about models. I've talked about and how we do them. The challenge always is we don't want to go into a full demonstration and there's not enough time. However, there's a glimpse. So in terms of reserves, let me just take you through some very simplistic areas. This is probably 1% of the content people get, but it may be useful to you. So on the left here, if everyone can see that, usable revenue reserves as a proportion of net revenue expenditure. Now, I'm not an expert. Now, so if there's any in-depth financial questions, we will take them away and get back to you. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a survey. We went into the diagnostics that we always do. Dan and his team are looking at these figures almost every day, and they're continually updated. And this is one of many outputs that we come from the models, and this specifically is reserves. So there are only 57 sets of draft accounts published when we did this analysis. That was a really interesting point, because we actually did a study on how many people are publishing their accounts, you know, and in England, certainly by published date, I think there was less than 40%, more than 30%, which, and there's very valid reasons for that. We have come out of some very interesting times. There is a backlog, but interestingly, Wales and Scotland, 94% of their accounts were published, and we kind of got picked up by the national press in making correlation with the fact that England and Scotland have their own versions of the Audit Commission, whereas sorry, Scotland and Wales, whereas England don't. Is there some sort of correlation there? But that's another topic. But these are some interesting sidelines that come up. But in terms of looking at this, I mean, first of all, they're color coded. So that model is color coded. We have unitaries, Mets, Shire counties, and 2 colors for outer and inner Londons. What our members or people that subscribe to the service get is they get exactly where they are on that graph. They exactly other authorities like them, how they compare, what's going on. And we can see that when we did a analysis of change in usable revenue reserves, you can see there's an 11% reduction, but that 11% masks quite a lot of individual falls and some rises, and it's unadjusted. And when we say unadjusted, it's unadjusted for COVID reliefs. So we also did an analysis that took into account when it's adjusted, and I think that the worrying thing, and it's from our point of view, and it is a view, most things in finance are views based on good data, is that you're still seeing drops. You're still seeing drops, maybe not as much, but you're around about the 10% mark, maybe slightly, some over between 10 and 20%. And if we look at patterns, and I'll talk about direction of travel in a minute, we can see that reserves tend to fall gently, and then they really fall quite quickly. And we think this is quite an unsustainable picture. Yes, there's inflationary pressures. Yes, there's definitely pressures in terms of funding. We know that there are areas of interest rates, but interestingly enough, our capital model isn't showing the interest rates moment. So we don't know if this really is a result of interest rates, or there's still more maybe not so good news to come. And the other thing with these that concerns us is that the fact that these are based on the authorities that are capable of publishing their accounts by the date. The ones that we know may not be in fine financial fettle are still to come. So we do think this is a concern, and we have to kind of look at this analysis, and we're always on top of this, and I think that's what people find useful in terms of looking ahead and what we might do. So another glimpse of benchmarking is trends. We always kind of look at trends because we've got such a vast amount of data in our data bank. It's always interesting. And you know, here's some S114 authorities. We look at direction of travel. As I said before, reserves tend to fall kind of gently. You need to look at them before they really take a tumble. And you can see on the left there, we have Northamptonshire, Slough, and Croydon. You could argue that you could have seen some of these things coming. Hindsight's always a wonderful thing, but we can see there was a direction of travel where we're looking at, you know, reserves do tend to slide gently and then they really go. The real outlier there, of course, the big red line on the left that goes up and down is Northamptonshire, when it was then taken over and then, you know, created a new authority. They still have those problems. You know, those problems haven't gone away, and there is absolutely no coincidence whatever that in those authorities the debt gearing, which you look on the right, was the highest of their authority types. And debt gearing is really key, certainly in terms of needing to borrow and then interest rates, etc., that we're looking at. So I don't want to go into all the theories or whatever, but this gives you a glimpse of what the models are. Hopefully that's useful, and how we approach these things. Moving on back to your concerns. Okay, so budgets, funding cuts. Our view is, you know, we can't solve all the budget problems out there or the funding cuts, but we can shine a light and give people much more informed data. Now we're quite open. Anyone really could do what we do on financial resilience because we use published accountable data. The point is that we've got decades of this stuff and we analyze it and we look at it in a way that probably doesn't make it cost effective for people to kind of do themselves. So it's a very simple business model. For the cost of, I think, maybe 2 months of a mid-ranking accountant's salary, you get a year's worth of models and you keep getting a year's worth of models, and you get those things. So we think it's quite a good way of doing it. There is some talk around, and Dan is really really keen on things like RA and RO forms. He believes that there is some analysis to be done there, and a lot of people look at those, but they're not as reliable. And Dan speaks from experience. He was in an authority that kind of forgot to put any RO forms, and they became the subject of a BBC article that said, well, you know, something's not right here. But actually, it was a form that got forgot. Yes, it was important, but published audited accounts will always give you the real picture. Looking ahead to your concerns again: unreliable data, outdated IT, widening skills beyond finance, and digital skills. So again, we can't solve all of these, but the next topic really does touch on some of these areas. And going back to our 3 key areas, that's information management. So information management, excuse me, while I have a sip of water. Information management is one of those words like knowledge management. You know, transformation is another one, and it's really important that we're called LGImprove. I know that all of you out there would be in authorities and organizations where at least one initiative, if not now or if not in the past, has the word transformation in it. I did a TED talk about 2 years ago based on disruption, and my point was that, you know, people like to get excited about disruption. They used to like disruptive language. We feel the same about transformation. Transformation is such an all-encompassing term that it feels like everyone's transforming. And transformation takes into its kind of umbrella everything. We're called LGImprove, not LG Transform, for a reason. We believe that you need to look at the areas which you're having problems with in rigorous detail, and you need to make improvements in all those areas. When you add all the improvements up, you will get transformative results, not the other way around. So we're really keen on that, and our approach has been proven time and time again. Information management is kind of like that. What is it? What do you do? Well, again, we're pretty diagnostic and really clear about this. Most authorities are struggling with their information. Good quality data, what technology do they use, how their people use information. Our aim is to get, and we have done, to get authorities to a point where every single piece of information that comes into authority knows where it's going, what its life is, how it's accessed, who will access it, and its retention and disposal is completely automated. That's kind of what we do. But how do we do that? Well, information management actually breaks down into 3 areas. The technology you have, and one of the points was outdated IT. The information and data, one of the points was unreliable data, its accuracy, its integrity. Even if it's accurate and right, can you get it in time? You know, the amount of time you spend looking for information may completely devalue what you're going to use that information for. And people, ways of working. That's really interesting, these 3 points, that we take them all in one kind of setting, because and I wouldn't like to name names of large tech giants, but most authorities we found have made investments in Microsoft, some of them in 365, some of them in SharePoint. And I think what has happened is that people have a lot of technology and tools, and then they're kind of left to it to sort their information out. There's over 2,500 data cleansing tools out there. So what do you do? How do you do it? Well, that's because the information and data hasn't been looked at in a great amount of detail. And most importantly, arguably, is the people and ways of working that needs to happen. And that's what our approach does. So very simply, in terms of technology, we think that well, we don't think, we come across authorities that have these tools within their remit amongst a number of others, and very simply we think individual information, which is kind of your personal information, stuff about you, things that relate to you personally, goes on OneDrive. Team and business, you know, policies, procedures, how things work, team meetings, those sort of things go on SharePoint. And big project and program information can be used in Teams. Now, people will look at that and say, well, that's quite simplistic, but we go through a detailed view on how to do that. So that's our view of technology. Our challenge, I think, is that when technology isn't used properly, it gets mistaken for not working, or it's outdated. Tech is one of those things. When it doesn't work, then you know it's got to be the technology that's wrong. And I get that. I have it myself. But we don't think that. We think most authorities actually have made their investment. We just got to make sure they use it right. They don't need another tool. They don't need to spend more money on more tech. They need to just really streamline what they've got already. So that's really our approach to it. The challenges you have. The challenges you have, and this is real world. One of our clients, we went through the whole information estate, and this isn't just about asking people, it's also about looking at data crawlers right across their information and seeing where things are held. Where do you store your digital data? So let's just get really clear. You know, Outlook is an email and communication tool. It is not a file store. But in most organizations, it's become a file store. Personal drives, some shared drives, those big green bars on the left is probably reflective of a lot of organizations where information is stored. The problem is those 3 things tend to divide people in that they're not shared, they're not shareable. They get information gets duplicated across them. They don't unite people to the one set of truth. And that's what we kind of focus on. And we look at figures that do that, and we play them back to people and say, well, that's where most of your data resides. How on earth are you going to manage it? And it's not with another tool. Couple that with clarity on what you do with your digital information at the end of its use. This is a survey we did with a client maybe a year and a half ago. So you've got an area where lots and lots of information is being stored, and we won't even talk about the compliance aspects of it. I mail you a contract, it's in an email, you save the attachment to your hard drive, you take that computer home, regardless of how much security is in it, you have commercial information offsite, and is it readily available? That contract may change somewhere else. Now you have a duplicated version. Which version is right? You can see where we're going here. And are you clear what to do with it at the end of the use? Well, no, it just stays there. That's kind of the challenges we find in organizations. in terms of technology and information. But the ways of working and the information solutions are, again, I'm being very simplistic here because we have time, but every piece of information is classified, what its permissions are. We have to identify personal information because that has a whole ream of its own standards against it and what you can and can't do. And then retention and disposal. And the way we do that is we take organizations through, I don't like to use the word journey, but it is a journey of what is your file plan. And a file plan is really what would your information look like for your organization. So on our team, we have the co-author of the local government functional classification scheme. That's run by the Institute of Records Management. It's open, but the local government functional classification scheme is a scheme that says for a local authority, here's all the kind of information that needs to be stored. So, you know, one of our team has actually co-authored that, and it's nationally recognized. A lot of authorities say, well, we'll take that, but we want to mold it to our way of working, because a lot of authorities are structured in different ways and different departments and different acronyms. But you take that base and then you structure it. Once we have a view of that file plan, which we do with authorities, we then map all of their information against it, and we take every single person in that authority through a session of training on things like SharePoint. So widening digital skills is this is what it touches on, every single person. And we make sure that everyone understands where information will be held, how it will be held, how you can visually actually see it across the authority, and then we migrate it. Now, as well as that, every single person is also taken on a cultural change journey in terms of how would you deal with information, what does it mean, why is it really important. And we do get, you know, people that run with it straight away. We get people that will just go, yep, I get it, and we get people with saying, I don't like it. But we have all the ground, all the reasons why you should do it, how you should do it, and it's really, really key that you bring people and ways of working along with you. It's kind of missing. You put the best tools in place, classify all your information. It's kind of like a garden. Get it all done, leave it alone. Weeds are going to grow if you don't keep tending to it, and that's what happens with an information estate. So again, looking at, I can't do a demo of the whole information management piece, but I can tell you some of the results that we do have and have had. So DROT is really interesting. Has anyone come across the acronym DROT? So in information terms, it just stands for duplicated, redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And it's quite frightening. At least 2 clients, we've had 80 and 86% of their information just could vanish. They didn't need it. And here's a really interesting tip with tech companies. What they like to do is they come in and they take all your information and go, let's just shoot it up to the cloud, and then we can manage it for you and we can cleanse it. Well, you're going to pay for taking all that information up to the cloud and having it stored and having it. We do it the other way around. We say, well, we've actually got specialized tools that we use. We have a very specific tech partner who we've kind of trained in the way we do things that will look at all the information and go, right, you know what? You don't need 86% of it. And this is why. The clients there agreed that they didn't need it. So we actually only ended up taking 14% up to that cloud, which is a cost saving. It makes it more streamlined, it's easier. And those are terabyte figures, 10 terabytes to 1.3, 33 terabytes, 7. That's information. Retention and disposal schedules. So these are in the background, getting quite techy again. These are rules for every piece of information. So one of our clients had 200 lines in their retention and disposal. That's not enough for the kind of information that local authority stores. What happens to the other information? There's no disposal or retention rules against it. So 200 lines to 1,375, auditable, compliant, and fully automated. You know that this piece of information here is going to be kept for 7 years, and then it will be archived. And you'll know where the archive is, and it will be automated. Cultural change program, as I said, regularly takes thousands of staff through a structured, coordinated journey. Some people really like to use the local government functional classification scheme so they can prove to maybe auditors or people that do it. We make sure that that ties in. You don't have to. There's nothing to say that you must use the functional classification scheme. But if you're an authority that really doesn't know where all your information is, and we are literally at the moment being approached by an authority that is part of a unitary that is bringing together 4 authorities. You can imagine 4 information estates all in one. one information manager, poor soul, is trying to say, right, where is everything? I can't even look at the amount of different tools we're using, let alone the information. What do I do? And we say, like, breathe, discovery and review. Let's go through the whole estate and let's do it that way. Defining the problem is kind of 20% of the solution. Otherwise, you don't know what you're trying to solve. Some quotes there: GDPR compliant file storage eliminated 75% of our old data, and the organization migrated and won an award for the excellence of the program, which is really helpful. So we believe that our approach to information management really works. It's different. And coming back to where we started at the beginning, we can't do everything, but we know with a local authority, getting financial resilience is key, and there's ways to do that, and they're not often the ways that are talked about and approached. But getting financial resilience is fine, but you've got to make really good decisions. To make good decisions, you need accurate, timely information. And so you've got to go to the root of problem. Why aren't I getting accurate, timely, correct information that has integrity? And why am I spending so long looking for it? So those two prongs are kind of the cornerstones of our company. Like I said, we don't do much else, but we feel there's a key thing. We are at the moment running 2 or 3 information management programs. We've finished another 2 or 3, and going back to the accounts and the resilience, about 20 or so authorities are using our models at the moment. We now feel we're in a position where they need more exposure because we're quite happy with them, hence really kind of Astrid to invite me and talk a bit about them, and that's where we are. So I'll leave it at that. It is a canter through not just what we do, but what we feel is really important for the local authority landscape out there. And I'll hand it over to the Q&As. There are my contact details. So the website's there, the LinkedIn, the Twitter. You can email us at LGImprove, you can email me. We're often putting in updates and subjects about key things around what's affecting local government, what the reserves are looking like, capital health, and also what some of the problems are around information shared drives. We had an article the other day of, are you still using these kind of drives? You don't need to. So do keep in touch. I would love to connect with all of you. Thank you.